the first session talk will be given by Bart Ribbers, who will be talking about postmarketOS, a alternative operating system for your phone. So, Bart, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. So yeah, I'm here to talk about postmarketOS. It's a Linux distribution for your phone. It's a bit different than most people will be used to from Android and iOS. Nowadays, I think it's pretty well known, but for the people who it's not, I'm here to explain what we're doing and what achievements we've got so far and what we're working towards. So first, who am I? I'm Bart Ribbers. If you know me online, I'm known as PureTryOut. And I've been a postmarketOS core contributor from almost the start in 2017. And my main focus or my main job there is packaging KDE software and Asteroid OS packaging. So what is postmarketOS? Well, we're a Linux distribution. We're based on Alpine Linux, which might sound a bit weird. I'll go into that a bit later. But it's, yeah, we're this distribution, and we're specifically not Android, and also not iOS, but a lot of distributions and operating systems alternatives mentioned for phones nowadays are all Android variants. We're not, and we're not trying to be either. We're different, doing it our own way. And we see some significant problems with how Android is doing it, so we're doing it the Linux way. And our main focus is, our main reason we started is to, because in 2017 the phones released then all had a very short lifespan, about I think 2 years was the shortest and like 4 years was the maximum. But well, get any laptop now and you will be able to use it for like 10 years later, no problem. We thought that was a problem. And we saw a solution in using Linux to do this. So a big focus of us is sustainability. But also definitely focus on privacy, user control, things like that. So as a distribution, what do we do? Well, like any distribution, we just package software, make it available for anybody to use. But we're a bit different, because our main focus, it's not our only focus, but our main focus is phones, like I said. But phones are a bit of a difficult world to live in. So what we also do is making those phones work with Linux. We have a total of 500 something devices supported at this moment. I must say supported is in various levels. I wouldn't be able to use all those 500 as proper phones with calling and such, but definitely a bunch of them, and all of them can at least boot Linux, and you'll be able to use like a Raspberry Pi-like device, run your Docker container or anything. And about 100 of those devices are supported in our stable release nowadays, which means they at least have some basic level of support in which they can use any UI we have available. You can probably use things like the camera and calling and such. And we have a wiki, which includes a bunch more information on way more devices, also devices that we don't yet support, or people are at least trying to get to support but are not there yet. So our wiki is definitely a big resource, and yeah, and a large part of the work we're doing is upstreaming device support, where any laptop has quite regular generic components used by most laptops, probably have a Linux driver available. That is not the case for phones. So for phones, we need to write drivers ourselves, and when we do, we make sure to upstream it to mainline Linux, to Linux store files, so anybody can use it. And that's a big part of our work. And I would say that's probably the most important thing we're doing. So even if we're not around anymore later, you'll still be able to use any Linux distribution on your phone. So we're supporting the community around this and giving the resources where needed. So our main focus is definitely on phones, but it's not our only focus. We are still a regular institution. You can run it on your laptop, on your desktop, whatever. I run it on my desktop at home to do gaming with Steam. I run it on my laptop to give this presentation. I have a phone with me. We even run it on smartwatches, on some TVs, I think, and definitely Raspberry Pis. And all goal is to run the same platform with the software you know and all the interfaces you know and such. So yeah, phones, tablets, Chromebooks, Intel and AMD laptops, like any distribution, but also ARM laptops, which are also annoying. they're laptops, but they have the same problems as the phones mostly. So we try to bridge the gap and make those differences disappear where possible. So technically, although we boot on most devices with kind of the same software, they're not all the same. And these differences come mostly down to hardware support. So, like I said, devices often don't have their drivers upstreamed to Linux. And we try to bridge this gap, so we get mainline Linux onto there. And firmware, but also like the bootloader situation is weird. On your desktop, you probably have like grub or systemd boot or anything. That is not really a thing on phones. Nowadays, we're getting there, but it's a bit different. Mostly the bootloaders are meant to specifically boot Android. Android's Linux, but it's different. It's annoying. So we're trying, one of the things we're doing is porting U-boot to it, which is, I wouldn't say necessarily a bootloader, but it can function as a bootloader. And so whatever bootloader is already there from Android, first boots U-boot, that subtracts the weird differences in booting systems, then boots Linux, and then because we as a system can know there is U-boot there, there's a system we know and is sane, we can do anything we want. And we're trying to get all those devices to use the same packages where possible. So where at the very start we had a different package, different software available to make the hardware work for every device out there. Nowadays we're trying to unify those in smaller but shared packages. So when you have the same SoC available as different devices, you can probably use the same kernel. So for example, the OnePlus 6 uses the same kernel as the OnePlus 6T, but also like a Poco phone and things like that. And where, yeah, they started out with probably millions lines of code different in the Linux kernel available. Nowadays, they have the same exact software running on there, which is, I think, pretty amazing. But to do all this work, we still have quite a lot of device-specific hacks, and we try to make those hacks as small as possible, tiny possible, and make them not as much of a problem as they used to be. So I'm mentioning mainline Linux quite a bit. I'm not sure if everybody is up to date with how it goes in these worlds. But of course, Android is Linux, and people often come up to us, hey, Android is already Linux, why are you doing this? Yes, Android is Linux, but if you actually look into the kernel, whatever it's using, it's way outdated. So I have a Fairphone 5 with me and a Pixel 3a, and that's a good example, because the Fairphone 5, for example, released in 2023, came with Linux 5.4, which was already out of date back then. I think we were already on 6 something. But my Pixel 3a, which runs postmarketOS, was released in 2019, but now has Linux 6.19. Way newer, way more up to date, way more secure as well. And the Fairphone 5 also supports postmarketOS and also runs the mainline Linux kernel. But it's a good example of how a very new device, even from a manufacturer that focuses on sustainability and long-term support, already comes with outdated software. And outdated software comes with security problems, with compatibility problems, things like that. And Android, manufacturers don't like their software being open source. So what they do, if they make a driver and put it in a Linux kernel, they have to open source it. It's because of the license, GPL3 of course. But they do not like that, so they do it a little bit differently. They make a little abstraction layer in the kernel that they release the source for, but the actual driver parts are all in Android. And Android is not bound by these license rules. So these are proprietary and not available for anything else. They're also made specifically for use on Android. And if you use different software, which is not made for Android, like KDE or GNOME software, those things won't work. So there is a project available, it's called libhybris, that makes use of these existing Android drivers, because it might not be the right way to do it, but then again, it does make hardware supporting relatively easy because the drivers are already there. So libhybris exists to use these drivers on a regular Linux system with everything else from Android removed, which is nice, but you are still using this outdated software. I think it has a place in the world, but I don't think it's the solution to the e-waste problem we're having. And yeah, you're basically still reliant on the hardware support from the manufacturer, but as we've seen, manufacturer doesn't really care. They just want you to buy the latest device they have. They don't care about the device they released 2 years ago. And because if you have old kernels, you're also missing new features. We had a case in the past where devices were using Linux 3 point something, and an open SSH release was made, and suddenly you couldn't SSH into your phone anymore, which we supported earlier, because the kernel was too old. It didn't support some cryptographic function, I think it was. Yeah, it's not sustainable. We need mainline Linux on there to do anything proper. So, besides being the distribution, we're a community, and I think that's the most important part of what we're doing. We're trying to make sure that if we disappear somehow, you can still use the things we've come to know, the software we made, the knowledge we've gathered, and we're trying to avoid that this only works in postmarketOS. That's not an approach we want to take, and there are alternatives like postmarketOS, but different, like Mobian, that's a Debian-based distribution. We have a good contact with those, and we're actually quite involved with each other. We help each other out where possible. We share software. Mobian, for example, made a daemon to route call audio from the modem on your phone to the speakers, but we've used that as well, because it just works, but nowadays the daemon is a little bit old. It still uses old audio software, Pulse Audio, instead of Pipewire. So we're trying to replace the daemon for something new, but again, doing it in a way that it's in Pipewire, which everybody already uses. So Mobian can use that again. And yeah, our community started out small. It started out with just one person in 2017 who started the project. And in 2023, we had only 8 maintainers, as we call them. People are actively involved making decisions about the project. But nowadays, we have 27, I think it is. I think even more nowadays. And we're expanding, but also expanding, changing the way we work, changing the organization to make it more democratic, because we still have a sort of a small core group. Like I said, I'm a core contributor. The core group still makes some important decisions, but we want to get rid of that and make it more of a community-based project than just those 8. And yeah, our mission is sustainability, user ownership, and just a better society in general. And we think we have to reflect that as a community as well. So yeah, we really care about our users, but also the developers of the software that we use. And that means that we try to use upstream software where available and where requested. So, for example, we package KDE software and GNOME software, and on the desktop nowadays, they really have a focus on new features, technologies that are mainly made possible by systemd. But as an Alpine Linux-based distribution, we didn't have systemd. That was a problem. Some people prefer that, and that's fine, but at least KDE and GNOME really requested, like, please get systemd, because it just provides features we need. And yeah, the experience might feel a bit off on our system. So we got to work, and nowadays we have systemd available in our distribution. And it required a bunch of work, talking with upstream mostly, because there are some technical differences which we'll come into a bit later. But yeah, we made it work, do a lot of talking mostly, because a lot of development work is really just social work, talking with the right people, getting them over a certain line or decision. Yeah, and a major reason systemd was difficult is because we're using a different C library. People might know glibc. We don't use that for reasons. I'll get into that. But systemd really required some glibc features. Nowadays, it also works with musl. It's upstream, and no downstream patches are necessary anymore. Yeah, and for software, of course, we have our own distribution channels with our own package manager, but a lot of software nowadays is available as a Flatpak on FlatHub. We support that. In fact, we install it by default and have the FlatHub remote enabled by default. So any software you really want to use on your phone, from your desktop, you can use on your phone. Just literally the same code, no difference needed. It just has to make sure it has probably an ARM build available, because phones are ARM and not x86. And we try to avoid proprietary software where possible, of course. That's also why we don't use Android drivers, but that also applies to any software made for actual applications. So at least in GNOME software, and I'm not sure about the KDE one, but we disable proprietary sources by default. If you want, you can still enable it, but we want to promote open source mostly, and do not focus on the proprietary stuff. And then we have lib camera. That's like that's a driver system for cameras on your phone, but also on your desktop nowadays for webcams and such. And it's basically like Mesa, if you might know that, which is for graphic cards, but this is for a lib camera, or for phones and cameras. And we try to reduce the mobile specific stuff, but we make sure we package the bleeding edge software in there available, because there's a lot of work being done, and your phone or your phone's camera might not work at the moment, but they'll probably have a driver work in progress. We'll make sure that's available and ready to be tested. And the feedback we get from that, we give back to the lib camera developers, and and we have good contact with those. So as I mentioned, we're based on Alpine Linux, which some people might not know, and some people might know, but think that's for different use cases. It's probably the most used distribution in Docker containers, but it's not focused on containers. It's general purpose, and containers is one case where it's really useful, but one of the reasons it's useful there is also one of the reasons it's useful for us, because Alpine Linux is really tiny. If you download the root file system without the kernel, if you unpackage the whole system, it's about 9 megabytes big. That is insanely tiny. Of course, that's just the basics, but still, it shows how small it is. And this means it allows for really fast development. We're caching stuff, but we don't really need a cache, because we can just download 9 megabytes in a few seconds and go on. So this allows for really fast development, because you can just wipe your whole system and get back to whatever you were doing, and really, without downloading huge amounts of work. And as an example, as a comparison to Android, if you want to build Android, I think it requires like 100 gigabytes of disk space, and that's just one version. But you're probably working on different phones and on different software, so you need several hundred gigabytes, and you need like gigabytes of RAM available. That's not the case for us. We're tiny because we're based on Alpine Linux. And also Alpine Linux makes it possible for, or makes it really easy to package software a lot. Personally, I think like Debian packaging is such quite complicated, but Alpine Linux packaging is really simple. It's just one script, one file, build definition. It's quite comparable to the Arch Linux descriptions. So if you know that, you can really easy transfer your knowledge across. We're lowering the barrier of entry by being based on this easy to understand and small system. However, being based on Alpine Linux means we're different than most distributions. We're not a conventional Linux stack, and that mostly comes down to the use of muscle libc. So the core of every Linux distribution out there, or any system really, is a C library. And on Linux, the most used one is glibc. It's from the GNU project. But Alpine Linux uses muscle libc. That is, it largely does the same things, but it does it a bit differently and a bit more strict. It's a blessing for us because it's small, it's tiny. It makes it possible to run the system in 9 megabytes, but it's also a curse because not every software supports it out there. So it does allow us to run a package manager in less than 5 megabytes big, all statically compiled. Statically meaning you can take executable made for, say, Alpine Linux, but also run it on any other distribution. You can run it on Fedora, on Ubuntu, on Debian, anything, and all within 5 megabytes. And that allows us for really easy bootstrapping of the system. You don't need an installed Alpine Linux system. You can take any distribution, get the package manager, it's only 5 megabytes, and run from there. Bootstrapping really easy, and it makes iterating on your software really quickly. You can build a device, you made some software, you made some changes to your stack, you can build an image, run it on your phone, and think, oh, I did something wrong, I would have to change something. Well, you make your changes, and within minutes, you have a new image for your phone available. And muscle libc and APK is one of the ways that is allowing us to do this. It's not. It has its problems as well as downsides. Mostly, it has less users because we're one of the few distributions that use muscle. It's missing some more important stuff like translations. Although our system does translate. Some car parts are a bit different and a bit annoying. We are working on that, and in fact, we have forgot the word, a grant. There you go. Thanks, a grant from NLNet to make that to improve that, and also with the goal of again not just working on postmarketOS, but on every distribution using muscle. And this is actually working out quite well. I think nowadays we're pretty much there compared to glibc. Yeah, and on the other side, like I said, it's not used as much. So there is less testing involved. There are sometimes bugs that are specific to using a muscle. We're trying to get rid of those, but yeah, it just doesn't have the same use. But I think in the end, it is mostly beneficial for us, although it is a downside. One of the people would say downsides, but I think it's beneficial. Proprietary software probably doesn't run our system because it's not compiled for muscle libc. That's either a blessing or a curse. It's up to you. So all this software development, we do that by a tool called PM Bootstrap, postmarketOS Bootstrap. It's a Python tool which we've written to basically do all the work we need to do in postmarketOS. So it means building packages, building device images, running virtual machines, flash your device, like change the installed operating system for hours, and do all of that at once. We try to make this tool as portable as possible. So again, don't just run on Alpine Linux, don't just run on postmarketOS. So we use change routes to accomplish this, and again, the statically compiled package manager. And this allows you to, on any distribution, just like install the tool, run 4 commands, I think it is, and then you have an installed system on your phone. We do also have pre-built images for your phones, but for development, it's really easy. We made it really easy to just build your own with whatever software you want instead of the software we're dictating. And the main goal of this tool is make development easy, quick, and fast. So as a project we started in 2017. It was made by Oliver Smith as a one-person project, really. He did it for a year, and in 2017 he released it. Made a blog post. Back then, we only supported 2 devices as a start. I think the Samsung S2 and a different one I've forgotten. But then in the first year, once that was released, once the first blog post was made, people joined in. I joined in, and we quickly expanded. So we got, I think, like up to 20 phones in the first year supported. Also, our first non-phones. So on the bottom left, that's the LG G Watch R. That's the first smartwatch which we ran on, and of course, does it run Doom? Yes, it does. It's not really usable. You probably have to plug in a keyboard somehow, but it works. And it shows also the first mainline running device. It's the N900 in the bottom middle. It's a classic, really. I think it's more than 15 years old at this point. It ran Linux 4.12 back then, but nowadays it runs 6.20. It's still supported. Of course, it has its issues because of being old. It's slow and such, but it works. It worked back then. It still works, and it's a good example of what we're trying to accomplish. But also, in that year, we didn't have any proper UI. The first images or the first blog post was made with the Western UI, which is a reference interface for Wayland-based systems. And it works, but it's not made for phones. It's not even really made to be used properly on desktop, but it was a good demo. And I started work back then on packaging KD, and the KD has its own mobile interface plus mobile. So I had on the bottom right, there's a screenshot of my first work doing there. It has its issues. I'm not sure how easy it is to see, but there's a cursor that's ghosting over the screen because I moved my mouse up. Yeah, that was an issue in 2017. Luckily, it's not anymore. But it was a good start to go on, and since then we've grown massively up to hundreds of contributors. We've gone to a lot of conferences. We've done talks on like FOSS and such. And yeah, we have good collaboration with all the upstream software we ship, like GNOME and systemd and KDE and things like that. So in the future, we have a few priorities we want to do. Of course, people can already use it as a phone nowadays, but it's not that reliable yet. Calling might work now, it might be broken tomorrow. This is not a way you want to, it's not something you want to base your daily phone usage on. It has to work. So we're improving reliability. We're doing that, for example, by doing hardware testing automatically. So we've developed software and a hardware piece. The hardware piece you can connect to any phone, connect it to the controls, connect it to the battery, and it allows us to control the whole phone from software, doing it from, so like booting the phone, but also flashing an operating system, and making a call, anything. And this allows us to do automatic testing. So if you make any change to any system, we can automatically run continuous integration on the phone. It will actually boot the phone with the software we're testing. It will run automated tests. It'll shut down again and give back the results. So if now we know, hey, audio works at this moment, you can call somebody, but we want to update Elsa or Pulse Audio or anything, we submit the change, we run it on actual phones. The system actually tries to do a call. It sees, hey, it fails, or no, the call connects, but there's no audio coming over from one side or the other. Now we know. This allows us to stop deploying that update and fix the problems first. So yeah, improving reliability. I mentioned audio already, but also cameras is a thing. Cameras are notoriously hard. We do support a bunch of cameras nowadays, but they don't make as pretty pictures as they did on Android. There's a lot of reasons for it. A lot of driver support, of course, but nowadays we're pretty on par there. But the lip camera project I mentioned earlier is working hard on making pictures better, but every change, of course, can also have some unintended consequences. So again, we use hardware testing, actually make a picture and compare it to a picture we did earlier of the same setup, and then you can compare differences and things like that. And a major thing we're working on nowadays is immutable. Of course, other operating systems like Fedora nowadays have immutable operating systems like Silverblue and Kineweed and things like that. It changes the base system. The root partition is read-only. It doesn't allow changes by default. And actually, next slide. Immutable. Yeah, so it doesn't allow any changes, and it prevents any unintended changes done by the user that might break your system. It prevents corruption in a way. And yeah, we've tried running a package manager for 10 years almost now, and although it does the job, it has its issues. Again, the phone is something you want to rely on. It's a bit it's a bit more important, I'd say personally, than having a reliable laptop. People rely on this as your gateway to the internet. It has to work. So immutability is one way we're trying to do that. It is important to note this is going to be optional. So often developers don't want to use this. That's fine. It's going to be an optional system, but it is meant for your grandma or anyone on the street that doesn't know any technical details. They were probably going to run this way, this type of software. And by being immutable, by preventing changes to the root system, you know that the software that I'm running on my phone is the same software as you are running on your phone. You haven't made any changes that can break things. Yeah, so there's more info available. We have, like I said, a large wiki earlier. There's lots of information. We have a big community that is available on various chat channels, but also on platforms like Reddit or Mastodon. I recommend, we have a blog post that every once in a while, I think every month nowadays, we release a blog post that talks about the latest changes we've made, and I would recommend following that to get any updates. That was my talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, I come around with the microphone.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, congratulations, because I think it takes a lot of courage to start a new distribution and do things from the scratch in a different way. I'm trying to understand the added value, let's say, this distribution has for our phones. So let's say it's not Android, okay, I get it. So no fancy apps, no DigiID, no banking, no this kind of stuff, right? This doesn't run there. But what's the difference from my old Nokia, you know? I see, okay, it can call, it can send messages like the old Nokia. I understand from your talk that it can browse the internet, nice, and it can also use a camera. Like, what's the added value from my old Nokia? That's my question.
Yeah, good question. For the old Nokia, we're running on smartphones. Your Nokia is a feature phone. It does less things. Of course, we don't have your banking app at the moment, but we do want to support any use case you have for a smartphone right now. We do, in fact, have a way to run Android applications called Waydroid. Banking might be, that's a problem, because banking has some really strict security requirements, or at least they think it's secure by having those requirements. We don't think that. But it does prevent from running on our system, but any other Android application will work. A thing like WhatsApp or whatever, that does run on our system. It needs this compatibility layer, but it does. Or added value compared to an Android is by being private, by being secure, by open source. You know what you're running. It doesn't phone home, it doesn't phone to any developer, it doesn't sell your data. It doesn't even require an account. Of course, you use your account on your phone, but it's not connected to any internet service or whatever. And compared to a feature phone, actually, we want to run on that Nokia, if it's possible. And in fact, we do run on a few feature phones. There's Nokia, I think we call it the banana phone. It's shaped like a banana, it's yellow, it's quite fun. That does run postmarketOS. And it does allow more stuff. For the developers on us, it supports running Docker containers. You can run a web server just for the lols of it. Why not? I think our added value is just running software you know, running software you can trust. It's open source. It doesn't require an account, and it does more stuff than your old phone, because besides making pictures and calling, yes, it can browse the internet, it can watch your YouTube videos, it can scroll to Instagram if you want to do that. It's a regular smartphone. It does smartphone things. Yeah. No problem.
Yeah, talking about features of these type of mobile devices, I was wondering if you do some really cool stuff that you can hook up your phone to let's say an external display and then have basically a whole desktop running for your mobile phone.
Yeah.
Features like that, and I don't know how far you developed with that. And also, of course, starting from the N900, they had especially made mobile GUIs. And I don't know if all those projects slowly disappeared, Silfish, Amigo.
Yeah.
But do you still have some kind of special mobile GUI? And what about Ubuntu Phone project? Are you doing anything with that? How does that integrate?
Good question. Good questions. Yes, lots of those projects you mentioned still exist. Silfish OS still exists. Ubuntu Touch exists, of course, and even Nemo as a project still goes on. Yes, they've made their own UIs available, and some of those are available. We've actually, for Ubuntu Touch, it has its own UI called Lomeri, based on Unity, but further on advancements. That is, in a sense, available on postmarketOS actually. It is just regular Linux software in a way. It's meant to run on Ubuntu Touch, but it's not made specifically for there. It is a UI you can choose, although on postmarketOS I wouldn't recommend it. It has a lot of packaging issues still being worked on. But that is available. And all those old projects, I would say, were a resurgence of that, I guess. We lots of time use those same software. You mentioned Silfish OS. A lot of that is based on the MER, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, MER project. That software is actually still used nowadays by Nemo Mobile, but it's also used by, for example, Asteroid OS. It's a smartwatch system which will be a talk on later on. I would recommend watching it. But that UI is also available, or at least I'm trying to make it available on postmarketOS, and that still runs the same MER stack as made back then. Of course, updated, made more modern, but the software hasn't disappeared. It's still available, and that's also, we're trying to not make it, like I said, specifically for us, so it will remain there in the future, and people will continue working on it and things like that. And I kind of forgot your first question. Sorry.
Special features with USB on the go, and then external displays, or just basically turning your mobile device into portable desktops.
Yeah, that works depending on the device. It needs hardware support mostly if you want an external screen or even any external peripherals at all. The N900, I think, had that actually. I think it supported displays, although a very old technique, so it won't work on any modern phone. But for example, the Fairphone has that support, and I think the Shift 6 MQ from a German manufacturer has that support. You can actually plug in your postmarketOS running phone into a monitor, and it will display something. depending on the UI you're using. FOSS, for example, is one UI we use based on GTK. That does support showing something on an external screen. KDE Plasma, of course, has a desktop version. They have their own mobile version, Plasma Mobile. And they are also working on, if you plug an external device or any keyboard at all, it'll show on that external screen and be a regular Plasma desktop. That's the goal. Have your phone as just your average daily computer. So that's definitely possible, but it really depends on the device. A lot of hardware that just doesn't support doing video or anything. Yeah. Sorry? The Firefox 6 also doesn't, I hear.
There's a lower spec USB output.
Compared to the 5, you mean? Yes, yeah.
So buy an old Fairphone.
Buy a Fairphone 5. It's my daily driver, I recommend it.
If I want to try out this, what is the recommended way to do this? Is it install it on an old phone, or is it in a VM-like setup?
I wouldn't recommend a VM, because that's just not a phone. You're probably doing it on your desktop. You're missing a touchscreen, for example. It's really a different experience. I would recommend getting an old phone first. We have, like I said, a wiki. There's a giant list of devices we support. And for a bunch of them, we also make pre-built images. Those are available on our website. Check those lists. What devices do we support? It might be an old phone you have in your drawer. But otherwise, a lot of those phones are able to get cheaply secondhand. Yeah, inflation on there first. As we said, we're not ready for like the majority of people out there to use it. So again, get a second device and don't do it on your first device yet before you have tried it. Maybe it's good enough and you can boot it on your phone, the main phone. But yeah, get a second-hand device for now.
I'd like you to talk a little bit more about the hardware testing, and in particular, is this something that is easy for additional contributors to participate in some way? If I have extra devices, is there a way for us to connect to the rest of the system for additional hardware testing results?
Yes. If it's easy, that depends on your level of knowledge. It's still, of course, hardware development. As a general board that is available as open hardware, we have our designs available. You could produce it yourselves. We're also looking into selling the device, not just for contributors to postmarketOS, but also for other projects. I know AsteroidOS has expressed interest in this, but there are more projects out there. You can get that device and plug it onto your phone, but it's not just plugging in. Yes, it is plugging into your USB port, but you also have to hook it up to the physical buttons. You have to replace your battery, because running a phone 24/7 with a battery is really dangerous. I wouldn't recommend it. It might explode. So we've replaced the battery, but that does mean you have to solder up the hardware, the board, to the actual phone itself. There are guides out there. We try to make it as accessible as possible. But it is still hard for development, so you need some level of knowledge there. It's also a bit early days still. We started on this last year FOSS-DEM, so in February, and this year FOSS-DEM with our first demo with an actual device hooked up to the system. But that was just a demo, and we didn't have it properly integrated in the system yet, and we're still expanding that. We do have a dedicated Matrix chat channel available. I would recommend joining that if you're interested. And that's all the people that are involved in this and can explain way more technical details about this whole thing. No problem.
Okay. I have a question. I've got two questions. Which device is kind of best supported with features? Can you daily drive it? And does GPS/AGPS work on your devices?
That's a difficult question to answer. The best supported, at the moment, I wouldn't say any is best supported. We have a few that we are sort of the same level that support the major things you expect from a phone, like a GPS, like camera, like calling and such. The Fairphone 5 is one of them. The OnePlus 6 is one of them. I think the Poco Phone F1 is one of them. I would recommend looking on the website. But then daily driving it, that's a different question altogether. Of course, you need hardware support for that, so you need a device like the ones I mentioned. But it also depends on what you're doing with your phone. If you need this banking app, like mentioned earlier, it probably won't be daily drivable for you because it doesn't run your banking app. If you run any complicated Android game that requires high performance, it probably won't work. But if you're coming from a feature phone or just used to or don't mind having a bit less things supported, for some people it's already usable. I personally have 2 phones with me at any point. One of them is running Android, one's running postmarketOS, because I would run one phone if I could, but I don't at the moment trust the calling yet. Some people do trust it. One of our core contributors also runs the same phone with postmarketOS, and he does use it for daily driving. So experience differs a bit per person. Like I mentioned, we're working hard on reliability, making this better supported. But for the average person, getting any Android app on there will still be a bit difficult. So if you need that, it's probably not daily drivable. If you're fine with open source Linux app available right now, it's already daily drivable.
Okay. More questions for Bart? Yes.
Hi. I'm wondering about the system sustainability is one of the goals, right? You want to, I suppose, what's the model? Do you want to prolong each device with a few years and have you done calculations of estimations of how much impact this is going to make?
Calculation on impact? No, not really. No, but yeah, a few years, lots of years if possible. Like I mentioned earlier, you can get any laptop from like 10 years plus back, probably 20 years, and it will still run modern software, modern Linux, up-to-date, secure. We want to do that with phones. So, like I mentioned, the Nokia N900, 15 years, something old. That's like, I wouldn't say it's a reference, but it's what we're working towards with all the phones. In 2017, when we started the project, an average phone was supported for like 3 years, or if you have a high-end phone, maybe 4 years. Luckily, nowadays, that has come up, that number. So even Android phones nowadays are supported for longer. I think 4 years is kind of average now. And if you have a high-end supported device, it might be 5, 6 years. But we're still not there. One major goal we set at the beginning is that every device that we do support, we want support for at least 10 years. So get any phone now and you'll be able to use it in 2036. That does require a lot of work. Like I said, we support devices, but not all of them do the same things yet. But any device that we get up to that some kind of level of support, we're going to support that level for at least 10 years plus. That's the goal anyway.
Do you have a time or an estimate of when you can daily drive postmarketOS?
Oof, again, difficult question. Depends on your level of daily drivable, but I'd say for the average, we're trying to make it usable for the grandma on the street. I really can't give you an estimate of that. I would have, in 2017, I would have said hopefully in 5 years, but we're almost 10 years later and it's not there yet. But we are definitely making progress towards that point. I talked about immutability. That's going to be a major part of this. That is really making progress. I think right now the first testing images has been released like a month ago. And having that be part of the proper system is probably going to be this year. And with that, I'd say for a lot of people that just do some web browsing, maybe some checking on Facebook, that will be daily drivable probably this year. But it depends on the device, because you need camera support, get a device that has camera. So for any phone out there, that'll take a long time. But for just basic use, if you have the right phone, yeah, depending on use case, it might be this year, probably otherwise next year.
Yes, thank you. I got a 3-part question. One is about after you install it, how do you keep it up to date? Like, is it rolling updates? Like, what is your upgrade path for your whole installation? That is one. And then the second one is, I see a lot of mobile phones that have 5G, and I want to make a network device out of that with Linux that is secure, and this could be one of those solutions. But there's a binary blob often involved with getting your modem working. And they have 5 years support if you're very lucky. What is your experience with then the networking stack, keeping it secure, or is it just not possible after that period?
Secure is a bit of a difficult one. It comes in 2 parts, like the software running on well, originally within Android, or in this case within our stack, that is updatable. That's you just run your package manager and get a new update available. That's no problem. There's an issue of firmware, though. Firmware is, like you mentioned, proprietary. We do not have control over that, and you are reliant on the manufacturer update for that. We're trying to integrate with firmware update, FWUpd, and for like, if you know the Pine phone, that is supported in there, and it does support upgrading the modem. But for an average device, that's not really doable, sadly. So we can get security up to a point, I'd say. Modem specifically, if you're really worried about security there, I would just disable it. Yeah, it does prevent calling or whatever, but it does make the rest of the system at least more secure. And we are talking with some manufacturers to hopefully get our system better support on their phones, but also then provide those firmware updates better. So who knows? As for a release structure, we have two kinds of releases. We have stable releases, but also rolling releases. Our stable releases are released every half year. They're the same interval as Alpine Linux has releases. And then every release, if you don't update it, we support it for like for like 8 months or something. I don't know on the top of my head, but for 8 months or so. And then we also have a rolling release. We call it Edge. And every time we make a new stable release, that's just a copy of Edge in a certain time frame. So whatever you prefer. Rolling is a bit less stable, but you get newer software for it.
Can it install once and then update every 8
Yes.
Hopefully a quick one. I'm interested in how do you do device testing? I remember from the Cyanogen Lineage OS times that people had, just contributors had owned some devices, and if someone sort of left the project or became inactive, then sort of all the things they had, and especially if you support hundreds of phones, like how do you sort of do that in a governance way? Like if you want to support some things, is there like a ownership of devices by the project, and like the testing can be done on devices regardless of individual contributors owning the systems? How does that work?
Yeah, good question. The problem you mentioned with Lineage OS, we also had that problem where the contributors just supported the device and then just left, and we heard nothing of them. We definitely do have the problem. Like I said, we support 500 devices, but a bunch of them probably don't have any active contributor at the moment. We are changing our governance system a little bit to improve this, where we made a blog post recently about sustainability, where this was touched on. And to get any device reliable up to daily driver level, you need active contributors that not just make the device work now, but keep it working. So we're making, we have devices categorized in 3 levels of support: testing, community, main being the best. And we are setting up new requirements. If you want to get to a device into main, it doesn't just require certain hard level of support, but also community support. So it should not just one person doing this. It should be a team of at least 5 people doing these jobs. They should be divided between them, and we make sure that this team is there, is present to support this device, is ready to test any change for it. And if somebody leaves, the team has to make sure another one comes in to fill that role. We're still working on figuring this out, how we're doing it properly. But yeah, we have seen this problem of just drive-by contributors, and we are working on improving that. We have chosen a few devices that we're going to focus on the next period. We won't lose focus on all the other devices, but these are going to have this first team available with properly supported. It does also mean hardware testing, like I mentioned earlier. The device has to be hooked up to the system, and it has to run automated tests, things like that. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Bart.
Thank you.
Yes.